Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Elisa Sklar. I'm the VP of Marketing at GIS Planning. Very happy to have you here today, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days. So, without further ado, I'd like to begin talking about our topic for the day, which is giving you a sort of crash course in 30 minutes or less in mining your website traffic data for key information. And this will be of particular use to any place marketers, but also anyone who is in charge of promoting their community for investment attraction, business retention and expansion. How can you be sure that the efforts that are being put in to do so are actually paying out in any kind of way? So let's take a look at the content that we've got here for you. First of all, the important thing to note when it comes to putting any website out there is that building the website on its own does not mean that we get a chance to walk away. Obviously, what we need to do is think about what comes next. And that's really where these metrics come into play, is to kind of help keep us accountable as much as possible to make sure that we're able to track what has been done. So that is really these next steps with the analytics. So strategic use of the website and the web tools means setting goals, establishing strategies to meet them, and then, of course, tracking the visitors and their behavior. And that's the really important bit. And very often when I'm working with clients, as I do in my capacity as VP of Marketing here at GIS Planning, is I know that things get set up and then people sort of have the tendency sometimes to ignore that back end and walk away and focus on other things. But we want to keep that level of accountability. And the great news is that you don't need to be a tech wizard to make sense of the analytics. We're going to offer a very quick overview of how these things work. And I think you'll feel pretty confident to be able to go back in today and see what you've already got set up. So we're going to look at just a brief review of some terms. We'll take a look at Google Analytics. We'll take a look at the next tier of analytics that let you get a little bit more into the weeds when it comes to the economic development data. That's on your data tools. And then we'll talk about tools that allow you to go even further in. So that's thinking of reverse IP versus cookies and pixels, what the difference is. And then we'll talk about that lead gen ID, that kind of most detailed level of analytics that lets you see what companies are on your website. So a quick glossary of terms. Visitors are the people who go to your website, of course. The unique visitors means that it's the number of original non-duplicate visitors to a site over a defined time period. And that data is determined by cookies. Cookies are small bits of code that gets put on your website whenever you fill out a form. When you log in, it's one of the reasons, you go back to Amazon and you don't have to put your username and password in if you're using the same computer. Those cookies help them remember you, and it saves us a bit of time, but it does mean that they're able to recognize you when you come back. And that when you are a return visitor, Google is able to parse out the difference between first-time visitors versus returning visitors. Page view means it's the amount of times visitors arrive on individual pages of your website. So a reloaded page, if they click on reload or they go to a different page and they come back, that counts as additional page view. Bounce rate is a term you've probably heard, and that is the percentage of visitors to a particular website who navigate away from the site after viewing only one page. And we really want to try and keep those bounce rates low. If you've got a multi-page website, most websites have more than one page on them, and so we want that number to be low. If you have a single page website, I don't know how many of you do, but it's very possible you do, then that site, the bounce rates are kind of meaningless because they could spend hours on that page. There's nowhere else for them to go within your website. Other terms, direct traffic means those are visitors who come to your website because they have typed your URL into the browser address bar, or else they use a bookmark to get to your website. They're coming directly to you. Organic traffic are people who find your website from unpaid search engine results. They go to Google, they click in economic development, Bergen County, for example. And if they come to you via that Google search, that is considered organic traffic. Referred traffic, on the other hand, are websites that send visitors your way. So an example of referred traffic would be if a news article appeared and had the link to your website in there and they clicked on that link and came to your website, that news article online is a referral source. Other common referral sources are social media. So LinkedIn would be a big one, Twitter, Facebook, whatever else you might be using. So it gives you a quick overview of some terms that may be familiar to you that you've probably come across, let's do a look at Google Analytics. And the nice thing about Google Analytics, of course, is that you can Google, how do I use Google Analytics? Google is a user manual for just about everything, as you probably know, and they have tremendous resources that allow people to understand how to use them. And when you first log onto your Google Analytics, this is what the dashboard is going to look like. And I'm going to kind of bring us in and talk about some of the things that you can see on there. I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds here because I do think that this is something you can continue to educate yourself on after this webinar. We only have 30 minutes after all, but it begins the process of demystifying something. It's really meant to be very user-friendly, and it really is a great way to actually get in there and understand that what actually is going on. So you shouldn't feel at all intimidated by it. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things you'll see on the dashboard, and that gives you a sense of what you can click on to learn more about. So I'm zooming in on some of these panels, and you'll notice that all of these panels will have additional links that'll invite you to go further into that particular kind of data on another page that it'll break it out for you in greater detail. So the top left of this analytics dashboard by default shows you the number of users. Now you can customize the date range. So on this demo site, what I did was I put in January 1st up until today. Very easy to do that. You'll notice, let me go back to the previous page so you can see how easy it is to do that. At the very top, you're able to go in and narrow that down. So in this case, you can see it's giving us the last 7 days. Actually, I think what is done by default when I took this screenshot. And we can see users, sessions, that's the number of times an individual user did things, visited your site. You'll see the bounce rate in this case. That's a pretty good bounce rate. And you'll see also the session duration. How long on average in the last 7 days did people spend on this website? And you'll see also at the top here that it's showing a rise of 14%, which is pretty good. Something happened on this website to encourage people to stay a little bit longer. That's a good sign. And we also see at the same time that the bounce rate has gone down over the last 7 days. That's pretty good, over the average. So that really takes us into that next level. Now, how do you acquire users? When I go into our clients' websites, this is one of the things that I'm looking most closely at. Over the last 7 days, in this case, you can see where it's coming from. We see referral traffic as the dark blue, the organic search as the next blue, and social, and then direct. And what I like to see from on a well-trafficked client site, what I'm looking for is as much referral traffic as possible. In other words, you can't just count on direct traffic to get you there. I mean, people are going to be coming in directly, but the marketing, that effort happens through referral and also paid, if that could be other. In this case, this particular demo site, we didn't have any paid search, but that would be another thing that you could actually track here. So I want to see where that referral traffic is coming from, and we'll do that later on. Now you can click on the acquisition report on the bottom right there, and that will allow you to get a little bit deeper in, dive in. And I'm going to show you what that looks like very shortly. The other thing it gives you is a little bit of a breakdown on some insights here. So we see that more site users returned to your site in February. The number of users over the past little while, 787 users in January, 128 of those came back in February, so you had an 18.75% return rate, which is pretty good. Of course, this will really be a relative number. It depends on the client. How active are your active users trending over time? So in this case, you can see what happens with your active users, the ones who are coming back frequently, and you can track them also over time and see what's happened. Now, you're going to want to measure this against any content, new blog posts, campaigns, paid ads online, something that's actually happened. Perhaps you went to a trade show, were very active in driving people back to your website, doing some email marketing. That's something you'll want to look at. The other question here is how well you retain users. So that's really interesting to see over time what kind of retention efforts you actually have, and it lets you track that. This is an interesting one. So users by time of day. You'll see when people tend to be most active. In this case, I was using a West Coast demo site, so we're seeing some interesting patterns. happening at different times. You'll see where people are actually coming in. And this is over the last 30 days. So you can take a look and see that this is useful if you're going to be scheduling any social media posts, sending out email blasts. You can see what the tendencies are. It doesn't mean that you're locked into this, but it lets you kind of play with what it may be happening organically. At the same time, if you have been doing some aggressive marketing online, let's say releasing blog posts or sending out large email campaigns, this would be a time where you could see perhaps overall the effect of that on the week and when people came to your website. Sessions by country, also very useful. If you are doing a trade mission to Germany, one would hope that you're going to be getting people from Germany coming to your website afterwards. It's a place where you can go in and track that usage, and also to see where you are naturally drawing from. In this case, the United States, not too surprisingly, and Canada, and interestingly enough, Uganda. Sessions by device, and this is what I'm seeing with many of our clients, is that rising percentage of people are visiting websites on mobile devices, particularly when it comes to web tools, which is what we're tracking here. You can see that there has been a rise over time of mobile usage. If you are not using mobile responsive and mobile friendly data tools on a website, then you are definitely going to be losing leads. So useful to keep an eye on that. And then this is an interesting one, to see what pages your users visit. Now, I've blanked this out just so we don't see the content to keep it proprietary, but over the last 7 days you can see what pages were visited most often, what pages were visited next, to kind of track the usefulness of your content. You can drill down into individual pages, into content, and see, did they come from an organic search? Did they come from a LinkedIn post or a social post? How did they actually find their way? Was this a backlink from a city website that came directly to this page? So it is possible to drill down further. Now, just in terms of marketing, one of the places, as I said, I spent a lot of time looking at is the acquisition overview. So you want to see that you're getting pretty good referral traffic. In this case, this site is getting over 50% of their traffic was coming from referrals. Now, if you go into your site, Google Analytics, which should be free for everyone, everybody's got one with every one website, or you can have one set up. If your direct traffic is your top channel, then that to me indicates a problem. That is that you're either not doing sufficient marketing to drive people to your website, or that it's actually not being very effective. So that's really one of the first things that I'm going to look at if someone's looking to build traffic. Now you can then drill down a little bit further into click on any one of those and see what actually is going on. Referral traffic very high for this site. They've done a very good job of making sure there's backlinks in a number of places. Social doing a reasonably good job at the bottom, direct still above that. And then you can drill down further into that if you want to see what actually is happening. In this case, I went down into the referral traffic so I could see exactly which websites are driving people there. And this is where you can start tracking new users versus returning users, look at bounce rates for different pages. You'll see that number 3 has quite a high bounce rate at 93%. Pages per session, depending on what page, where the referral source was from. So what are the really good, rich referral sources will keep you there as long as possible. They'll have higher average session duration and more pages per session. So that gives us a kind of initial overview of Google Analytics and what Google Analytics can do for you. So let's take another look at the next tier of analytics. And this is really important because you should not be limited to just Google Analytics. We want to kind of think about what are the more important economic development analytics that you can get. So anytime you're using one of our GIS planning data tools, you will, the Zoom Prospector Enterprise one in particular, you will have access to the back end, which is mobile friendly, so you can still be accessing it from your phone. And you're going to be able to start getting information about what's happening with the sites and buildings and reports on your website. So this is an example of what the admin dashboard might look like. It's got some distribution. You can go and see what properties are in there and have them listed, what need to be approved, what are inactive. Inactive properties are something we want to look at because maybe they haven't been updated, maybe they've been sold or taken off the market. and that's really useful for you as well. Then you can start to look at your supply. So what is your sites versus your buildings? And that's just a quick graph that lets you look at that. You can take a closer look at what properties have been uploaded recently if you are using a RETS feed or an MLS service or asking brokers to upload their own properties. This gives you at a glance a sense of what the new supply is. But then it allows you to use different tools to look at what kinds of searches have been happening from an economic development standpoint. So we can start to look at searches by type, and again, there's a date range there that you can play with. You can look over sites, buildings, communities, and businesses to see what searches are being done. And then you can get a detailed report of searches by type. So you can start to break down sites versus buildings by month, and all of this, of course, is downloadable in different ways. Total counts of properties searched by type. This is really useful. Perhaps they haven't entered something into the search field. That's possible, but we're seeing that more people are entering industrial or retail over, industrial or office over retail in this particular case. So that unfortunately, so that actually gives you a chance to see. So maybe retail isn't something that this community is doing well enough, or maybe it's not important for this community. Perhaps it's an industrial park or something like that. Let's take us over to the next one. These analytics will give you an example of feature usage on your data tools. So on Zoom Prospector, what were people doing? You can see that full property reports. There were many of them being calculated on this demo site. Property reports, labor force reports are very popular. A lot of people were looking at demographics. There was healthy interest in looking at the community report, but also consumer spending report. So all of this actually could be broken down in different ways. And you could see what people were actually doing here. So where were they saved to folder? How were they shared on social? It just lets you see how the site is being used, what it says about your supply, what it says about the kind of interests that are being shown in different ways. Now, the final tier of analytics that I really wanted to make sure that we address here is to look at lead gen ID. Lead gen ID takes all of this to the next level, and it allows us to offer detailed information about the companies that are visiting your website. So site selectors and businesses, as we know, are researching locations online. Often they're doing that before they make contact with any economic developers. So they don't necessarily call you or email you. In fact, our research shows that they almost always begin by looking online to see what they can find. And you may not know about them unless you're using something like Lead Gen ID. So Lead Gen ID is reverse IP lookup. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, what that actually means. It is something that we have coded the details of our tools into that, so it'll give you very granular information about how your data tools are actually being used. And knowing who these companies are and what they're looking for offers a considerable competitive advantage to any economic development organization. So this gives you a chance to do proactive approach to lead gen. It lets you kickstart the conversation with them. It lets you take advantage of actionable intelligence about what they're looking for so that you can prepare a business case to present to them. And it, of course, shortens the site selection process because these are more educated, qualified leads, and you can proceed based on that assumption because you know what they have done to qualify themselves. It also means that you can do this proactive outreach. Presumably, they're looking at other locations as well. If you have this kind of analytics and you know who the company is, you can reach out and get there before competing communities are doing that. It also, of course, lets you evolve your marketing because it lets you see not just what is referring people back to your website, but what kinds of searches it brings them to, what kinds of activities they do once they actually get there, and you'll know a lot more about them. So reverse IP lookup is different. You've probably heard about pixels or cookies. Reverse IP lookup is a little bit different. This is a small piece of code that's pasted into the back end of your website pages, so you can't see it, just like with Google Analytics. And this lets you track commercial visitor IP addresses that then gets matched to company data. So every internet connection, every device connected has its own unique identifier, which we call as an IP address, and that is geographically bound. And commercial IP addresses are something that we can track with reverse IP lookup. Now, we are not tracking private or personal IP addresses. That means if someone is using their home computer on their home Wi-Fi, then it'll count them, it'll get counted in the total numbers, but you won't see anything about them. If someone is using a personal cell phone to access this, you're using the smartphone and the browser on there, then unless it is matched to a company with a company server connection, we won't know that they're doing that. Now, the other thing reverse IP lookup needs to be pointed out is that visitors don't know that they're being tracked. They don't get any notifications about it because it isn't giving any personal information. For example, you'll know that GIS Planning is on your website, but you won't know that Elisa from GIS Planning was on your website. Now, reverse IP lookup doesn't use any cookies, so it isn't actually violating any laws. And the difference here, you probably heard about cookies or pixels. As I said before, both of those things, what they do is they put a little piece of code on your computer when you visit and fill out a form or register or log in. Reverse IP lookup doesn't actually do that. It's not putting anything on your computer. And the other thing to note about reverse IP lookup, because it isn't tracking your device, is that we don't know what else people are looking at. Once they leave our website, we don't know where they go. Are they going to Amazon? Are they going to Netflix? We have no way of knowing. We have no interest in that. We're not tracking them afterwards. So sometimes we get people who are concerned that there's a bit of a creepiness factor with this, but we really don't get any personal information from our website visitors, and we don't know what they're doing when they leave our website. So what does this actually mean for us as economic developers? Well, the kinds of information that you can get from reverse IP lookup, from lead gen ID in specific, is that you get a name of the company searching your website, you get their company URL so you can check them out, and a little thumbnail of what their website homepage looks like. You get the company's main telephone number, you know the geographic location of the computer or smartphone associated with a company where was used to access you. So for example, if you are interested, if Hertz rental cars comes to your website, you would know actually which office. They have thousands of offices. You'll know which geographic location, which office had the device that was visiting your website. We'll know the industry category. We know the referring source for the website visit. Did they come by Google search, by LinkedIn? Was it a direct visit? We know then when they get to your website, how many pages they visited. We know how long they've spent on your pages, what searches they were doing, what search parameters they entered. Now, this is really interesting because we have coded lead gen ID with our online data tools, our GIS data tools like Zoom Prospector, intelligence components. We can tell you what they're searching for and what they've actually viewed. So what properties did they look at? What reports did they view on Zoom Prospector Enterprise? Did they do a 10-mile radius search around a particular property? Were they looking at demographics, at consumer spending, at labor force, at business, industry? All of that is something that we can actually track from there. An example of what the report might look like. It's the top part of the report. I'm going to show you the bottom in a moment. So the top part shows you that HR and Associates, they are a supplier of real estate research for McDonald's, restaurant chain, and they came and visited this website. You can see at the top that they came once. We get information about which office was used, where the computer was accessing the website. Some basic contact information, industry, number of employees for that office, and when it was founded. It pulls up some company detail from the meta description for the website. And this is an opportunity on your website, when you're using lead gen ID, you can assign different leads to different people within your office. So if you have someone who's in charge of franchise restaurants or manufacturing or aerospace, they would then automatically get notifications every time this specific lead came back to your web tools to do research. So really a great way to be able to stay on top of your pipeline and who is coming through. This is an example from the bottom part of that report. So it shows you, of course, date and time, duration. You can click on the link at the top if you want to see what link they use to find you. And now we start to get the business parameters. So you can see that they are looking for a minimum size, maximum size designation, something between 10,000 and 20,000 square feet. We can see in this case that they were looking for office, different min max. They wanted something that was for sale. In this case, it was looking for industrial with the different min max attributes. Then they looked at several property reports. You'd be able to click over there and go and see the actual property report. And then at the bottom, there is a demographics report showing that they did a 10-mile radius search around a particular address. So this is really kind of game-changing actionable intelligence for you. You can proactively contact promising leads, assign new leads to specific salespeople in your team with email notifications. You can set up automatic reporting for leads that are of interest. You can export these reports on visitors, keywords, traffic, referring sources, all of which supplements the data you're able to get from Google Analytics and your Zoom Prospector analytics to build a very rich picture of what is actually happening on your website. And it really lets you track the results of marketing campaigns. I had a client recently who was a little bit disappointed with their website numbers, but when we looked in Lead Gen ID, they were super excited to find that there were 8 really solid quantifiable leads on their page that they were able to then go out and contact. So even if the overall numbers, the quantity was low, the quality was very, very high, which was very exciting thing for them. And that's really what it all comes down to. So let's summarize here. First of all, we're going to go back and take a look what Google Analytics is able to do for you. It lets you keep tabs on following metrics, overall groups of visitors, where they're coming from, what language they speak, what country, whether they're using desktop or mobile, what days are busiest for your web traffic, and the general behavior of website visitors overall, what pages they're visiting, what pages they use to land on your website, because not everyone comes in on the home page, what pages are most likely to be your exit pages, the pages where people leave. If those are not call to action pages, then we want to take another look at that. We want to make sure that people leave only because some action has been performed, the desired action for their persona journey. What sources are sending traffic your way, what search terms, organic search terms, bring people to your site, what social media networks and referral sites are in use. Then there's the next level, our Zoom Prospector analytics. So this is for your online GIS data tools, and that lets you follow these metrics. So you can now see searches by type, searches by date, by size, numbers of inactive properties, types of features on the tool that tends to get used, and what subtypes or properties are most commonly searched. So the top sites, properties, the top communities that are being searched. And then it brings us to Lead Gen ID. And now at this point, we're able to get a little bit more deeper in there. It was really useful. We've drilled down. We can now see what companies are actually visiting your website. We can see what data tools they're using, what searches and search criteria they are using on those tools. We can see where they're located and what kind of industry they're in. We can see how they found your website as well. So that is useful because you can now parse out that the most interesting qualified leads, perhaps you discover that they come from one referral source. So that's a place that you're going to want to spend more time with your marketing. Maybe they're coming from LinkedIn. Maybe they're coming from the city website or the Chamber of Commerce website. You can see what properties were viewed, what reports they viewed, and you can track their specific search journey through your data tools, which is really useful because it tells you a lot about how you can tweak your marketing in order to best serve them. And so that really brings me to the end of this very quick crash course for today's website. I'm going to try and take a look at some of the questions. Just a reminder that you have a questions field on the right-hand side of your screen. So I have a question that says, we try to have the most important information up front on a page and specific titles, keywords for SEO, without having to click on a subpage. So how do you balance the analysis about bounce rate numbers as an indicator about how good or useful a site is for users to find the information they want? So this is a great question. It's a big question because it talks a lot about user journey, and I guess it depends on the personas of the people who will visit your website. So let's say existing businesses versus a site selector versus a business from out of country looking for a business location. So each one of those are going to come to your website with a very different goal or objective. There may have different information that they're seeking, and there's different actions that you're going to want from them. So you want to keep them on your website as long as is possible in order for those that information to be received. So let's say it's a new business it's an existing business looking for a permit application. Now, ultimately, you don't want to keep them there forever, but you want to make sure that they find out how to apply for that permit, and the information they need is there, and it sends them to the correct page. But if it's a prospective business looking to expand or locate in your area, you want to make sure that A, they can get the information that they're looking for, because we know that businesses making location decisions and site selectors are very, very frustrated if they can't find that data. And if they can't, you risk losing them to a competing location that does provide that data online. This is where they're compiling their long lists and later their short lists. So we want to make sure that they can easily find that. And I often offer with our clients to do blind site testing, give them a goal, like a scavenger hunt, and say if you were a site selector or a new business looking for a location, you land on our page, on this home page, can you go and find available properties that meet your criteria? Can you drill down into labor force, workforce data? Can you look at creating a custom business cluster, for example? And then you can track that information through there. So bounce rate is one indicator, but it really is completely predicated on the persona and their objective. And so you can balance that bounce rate number against whether you feel that it was an adequate amount of time for them to realize that. And if it is a prospect that you're trying to reach, if we're talking about businesses making location decisions or site selectors, we always want to measure that against whether they reach the required call to action, which is a contact us website, which is ask for a demo, which is you ask for more information, or possibly it's create a folder with multiple possible properties that are good locations. Were they able to find that information? There is, on the Zoom Prospector site, you can now contact a broker directly from a property report. So is that something that they were able to do? And that's where you're going to need something like Lead Gen ID to be able to show you how detailed they were able to get in terms of being able to fulfill these things. So it's, I'm sorry, a long answer to a very good, somewhat complex question. Suzanne, you asked that question. I'm very happy to continue the conversation with you at another time if that's helpful. We have another question about whether internal searches are included with reports. So if you use your own property search, will it impact your analytics? That is a great question. Lead Gen ID gives you the opportunity to remove your own IP address or user from the analytics. So yes, absolutely. That way you're not, inadvertently blowing up your numbers simply because internally you're doing this search. That's not an accurate measure of external interest from others. Really great question. And Lead Gen ID does give you the opportunity to do that. If you are using the Zoom Prospector analytics and you are logged in as an admin, it also, I believe, will allow you to parse those out. On Google Analytics, this is actually an excellent question. I must admit, I don't know that, but I believe there must be a way to remove yourself, but I would have to look into that a little bit further, and I'm happy to answer you that in an email. I don't see any additional questions coming in, but you have my contact information here on the screen. I'm more than happy to discuss with you if you would like to know more about in particular Zoom Prospector Analytics or Lead Gen ID. I really do believe that these are game changers because they let you do so much more with the knowledge that you've got there, and they really make a difference in helping to track that really high quality prospect traffic. So I will thank you very much for your time today. Please reach out with any questions. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon and look forward to getting a link to this in your email inboxes in the next couple days. Thank you. Bye-bye.